Loudburst. Just what you want to hear.
In 1986, the world was shocked by news of the death of the political prisoner Nelson Mandela. His funeral was watched on TV by millions worldwide, leaving an indelible impression on those who witnessed it. Only, of course, this never happened. What you just heard is the cornerstone of what's become known as the Mandela effect, a situation where people remember, often with great clarity and specific details, an event which didn't happen.
The internet age has thrown up dozens more, usually revolving around misremembered bits of pop culture. You only need to put Shazam movie or C-3PO's leg into a search engine to see two of the most prominent.
And now it seemed as if we'd stumbled across a nest of these things, a series of interconnected stories based around a specific geographic location in the middle of the English countryside. A place where people reported entering a world that wasn't quite right somehow, where certain details or people's reactions or even people themselves seemed wrong or off somehow.
Sometimes these experiences were immersive, with our witnesses spending as long as a couple of hours in a confusing world which didn't add up. Other times our witnesses just glimpsed a detail, a fleeting moment that couldn't be, which stayed with them forever. But what was it about this particular place, our very own Bermuda Triangle, that made it so fertile for this type of paranormal event? Would any future reports of strange phenomena that we heard obey the same pattern? I'm Joel Morris.
And I'm Will Maclean.
And this is Broken Veil.
Episode 4. The Window.
A friend of ours, Tony, and a friend of Joel's, Sarah, had both told us intriguingly similar tales of visiting the headquarters of a mysterious corporation deep in the Essex countryside, which might or might not have been the same place in both accounts.
These stories were, however, impossible to verify, and we were stuck until another mutual friend, Al, told us about a visit he made to somewhere not far from where Tony and Sarah's stories had apparently taken place.
We now had 3 accounts of people in the same location, a particular corridor of the Essex countryside, each undergoing a strange experience in which memory, perception, or possibly even reality seemed to bend.
We were also able to investigate the second part of Al's story, of seeing the actress Gabrielle Glaister dressed in costume for a part in a film, by getting in touch with Gabby herself. Gabby swore to us that the film had never been made, meaning she could never have been there, at the bunker, in costume.
We needed more information, and this time we didn't have long to wait. Actors, when they're filming, have a lot of time to talk, and over summer Tony, our friend whose original story kicked all this off, ended up working on a project with another actor called Paul.
Tony told Paul the story of his trip to the mysterious building, and Paul listened intently before telling a story of his own, an eerie experience on a school trip in which, once again, the pattern repeated itself and 2 versions of reality seemed to be in conflict.
This was exactly what we needed. There was another detail which made Paul's story even more irresistible to us. We called Paul, and he agreed to tell us his story firsthand.
I suppose I would have been about 10 going on 11, because it was certainly in the last year of my primary school. I hated school. I couldn't bear it. It was a very austere environment. This particular Church of England school had a headmistress who was incredibly strict. I mean, she was great in many ways. She was really good at drama, but absolutely fucking terrifying in other ways. And so whenever there was a school trip, which wasn't often, I would punch the air because it meant I could get out of that bloody place. And naturally, the nature of the school, all the trips were always Christianity related. You know, we go to the local nunnery to watch some nuns cultivate strawberries. We went to Mitchelton Priory, we went to Westminster Abbey. You know, there was no trips to Chessington or anything like that. I think this must have been the last school trip, but it was way out in the sticks. It was such a tiresome trip on the coach. I mean, you didn't have smartphones then, so it was just, you had boredom, didn't you? Anyway, so we arrived, we went through this little copse, and there was this really, really old church.
This location was why Paul's story was so interesting to us, because this church, the one he'd been to all those years ago, was one we'd already visited within the course of our investigations. The quaint old church in episode 1 near the airfield, which we'd stopped at briefly in our quest for the blind roundabout. We stayed quiet and let Paul's story unfold.
And we all traipsed off the bus, and we're given our worksheets, you know, remember those? And it was written in pink ink, because it that wind-up photocopy, you know.
The first activity that Paul's class are sent to do is to make some brass rubbings in the church. But Paul protests, because he has bad associations from a previous field trip.
Now, my last experience with brass rubbings was at Westminster Abbey, and I remember I did one of a night. I think it was great. I didn't go around the edges or anything like that. But it was raining when we were leaving the Abbey, so I put it under my coat. And when we got on the coach, I went to unzip it to have a look, and it'd gone. I looked out the window and saw it floating in a puddle on the pavement.
So Paul refuses to join in the prescribed activity. But this is not a new experience for his teacher, and Paul is given something else to occupy him.
So I was handed a bit of sugar paper and said, you know, go and do some drawings. You've got your Caran dash pens, your pencils. Yeah, that's it. You remember I had my little tin of that Christmas present. And was told to go off and find a stained glass window.
So Paul sets off to find a suitable window. But it's at this point in his story that something very unsettling happens.
His recollection and our own experience of that very same church diverge sharply.
And strangely, there was what was partitioned off at the back of this very old, I don't know, medieval church, was this like a 60s annex chapel or whatever. And I thought, this is odd. You'd think now that maybe it would have been because it was bombed, it was decimated, and they had to refurbish it. But why would the Hun drop bombs in the middle of nowhere?
Paul was right. Why would a church in the middle of nowhere have been restored like an urban bomb site?
And this was the same church. He'd identified the name, the location, and the photo we'd taken of the gate and tower. But we'd seen nothing like Paul's 1960s annex on our visit. Was his memory playing up?
Of course, human memory is made fresh every time, and the most vivid triggers might not be words, or sounds, or even images, but our more basic, visceral, animal senses.
And the one thing that does stick in my mind was the smell. Because it had that sort of floor varnish, disinfectant smell, which reminded me of school, sawdust, because it was like that smell you get when you come back in September.
Hiding from the disapproval of his teacher, and maybe the social awkwardness of not wanting to join in, Paul finds a quiet corner and looks for something to draw.
And if the 1960s annex that Paul saw is a vague enough detail for us to pass it off as false memory, the next thing he sees in that place is so striking, so unforgettable, that its absence from our own visit to the church is now deeply troubling.
So I got my pad out and my paper and my pencils, and I looked around and thought, right, well, there was the main focus, was this stained glass representation. I presume it was Christ, because it certainly didn't look like Robert Powell out of Jesus of Nazareth. That kind of weird abstract art. It was very fragmented, sort of jiggedy-jaggedy. I tell you what it reminded me of. It reminded me of The Weeping Woman. Weeping Woman, you know, the Picasso. Yeah. You know, that kind of ugly, kind of twisted, broken face. And it was like that, but it was all had a touch of Terry Gilliam about it, the Monty Python animation, these little beady eyes. And I remember sitting there sort of drawing and looking up, and it was almost like Christ was sort of judging me or something, because he was so angry and this kind of penetrating gaze.
As he loses himself in his drawing, he also loses track of time, and the others are already on board the bus, and one of his classmates is sent to track him down.
Paul hears his name being called and rushes out of the building, bundling his precious art materials into his bag.
And as we were leaving, I noticed they had a rack of all the old church magazines. And on the front of one of them was a picture of the stained glass window. So I thought, so I'll have that. So I sort of put it in the Karen Dash tin, and we left and got on the bus and came home.
Unlike the witnesses in our other stories, Paul, although unsettled by the strange stained glass window, forgets all about it immediately afterwards. He's 11 at this point and has better things to do.
Anyway, so the following day, we had our worksheets marked. So we all showed off our little works of art. And this teacher, she looked at mine and went, "Oh, right."
Paul's teacher takes one look at the drawing and thinks Paul is simply seeing how far he can push it.
"You've done it again. You haven't taken this seriously. Because you've just made it look like one of your stupid monsters you always draw." Because that was, hold my hands up, whenever. I always like to spookify things, So I can draw Santa Claus, we'd always have bolts in the neck and fangs, So, but she was quite cross and gave me a proper telling off. But I tried to explain to her, I said, "Look, I can prove that I wasn't me being silly, miss. I've got a picture of it.
Of the real window?
On the front of the magazine, but it was at home, so I went back. Could I find it? No. I tore the place up, and looking under the bed everywhere, I couldn't find this bloody picture. So I couldn't prove it."
And so Paul is punished for trying to shock his teacher with his drawing. Another disastrous field trip.
He never finds the magazine, and neither his teacher or any of his classmates believe him. Nobody else saw anything of the sort. He never goes back.
And though he never sees the image again, it's weird enough to haunt his memory to this day. This abstract window of the deformed and furious Christ that Paul insisted he'd found in that ancient church.
So it was a very sinister depiction of it. So I associate that, I don't know, with that picture and Christ. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it means what? Because I'm not a believer. Maybe that's half the reason why. Because I think of that day, slightly being freaked out, and the teacher really telling me off in front of the class.
Had Paul invented the horror movie Christ he saw to upset a teacher he didn't like? And then, in distress at being called out in front of the class, invented the non-existent parish magazine as an excuse?
Were we just the latest audience for his childish defence? A story he'd told too many times? Or was the incongruous, haunting window something only Paul had seen, still waiting somewhere out in the Essex countryside?
Squirrel. Okay, not a squirrel. Don't kill a squirrel. We are back on the road again, and we're off to the church from episode 1. You may be wondering why we're returning to the church on the strength of Paul's story.
Because we know what's there.
Because we've been there, and we've seen that it wasn't as he described it.
It seemed that we'd located another Mandela effect, which we could once again research in order to prove or disprove. Either it was real or it wasn't. There was, for once, no grey area.
He was a child when he went there. He'd told off repeatedly by the teacher. It just seems like it's a very heightened experience, and he misremembered. And I thought the idea of punishment, I don't know. Anyway, I thought that basically he'd misremembered it. And he's a 70s kid. He sees monsters everywhere.
Yes,
he's haunted generation.
Because of that, I thought, I wonder if there were other 70s kids, and I wonder if anyone's got another story that lines up with it, because you never know. So I went on to Facebook groups for the area, for the church, for the sort of local history, who remembers the old butchers and things. And there were a bunch of people talking about going on school trips to that church, and a bunch of people on a little group who were scouts at the time, and they were full of little stories. And some of them said something that caught my eye, which was, who remembers the scary window in the church? So it's not just Paul, which is amazing.
Paul had told us a scary story, and we'd come up with a rational explanation simply because, like his teacher and his classmates, we'd been to the church and knew for a fact that there was no scary window there.
But if other people had seen it, if it was a part of other people's childhoods and not just Paul's.
A bunch of people who were in a similar situation to Paul, on school trips and scout camps and things in the area. A few of them, not many, said scary window. And that was by far the best spooky story I could find, because all the rest of them were pretty boilerplate, torch under the chin, campfire tales, which I've got one of those if we find nothing.
That for me is already sufficient reason to do the job, frankly.
Yes,
if someone tells me a ghost story, I'm happy to do anything.
Well, I've got one of those. If we get there and there's nothing there, which is what's probably going to happen,
great,
because reality hasn't split. I promise.
So you say,
as a treat,
right,
I will tell you a spooky campfire story.
So if reality doesn't split,
there's a spooky
you'll tell me a spooky story. Well, I'll take those odds.
You can hear our confidence that an ancient stone building would not change just because more than one kid misremembered a weird window. Nostalgia is contagious after all, and its distortions nowhere more catching than on internet message boards. Our rational cockiness meant we didn't notice that no matter how many times we explained it away, more weird stories had drawn us back again to the same place, driving the same narrow corridor of land, trapped in the same furrow, unable to get out.
We're back at the church.
Yeah, and remarkably or unremarkably,
Perhaps completely unremarkably,
it's the same. As you said, it's a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
It's been repaired, there's Victorian bits, but they've all been made in keeping with the original.
in sympathy with how it looked. It would
There's
have.
not brickwork or anything, it's all old stone.
And I tell you what, there certainly isn't. Is there's no 60s bit.
No, I mean, we're around the other side now,
Nothing.
we're closer to the road.
Unless we're missing something.
We didn't come around this side before.
No, there's nothing here younger than the Victorian bit.
Let's have a look inside.
Okay. We did a full turn of the churchyard and went back in.
Right, there's a board by the door, and which gives you dates of when it was built, and a record of fires. There's a fire in 1594, a fire in 1897.
A lot of fire.
But nothing.
No?
No restoration.
No record of anything, and it does.
Certainly not around the time that we're looking for.
There is nothing 60s in here. There's nothing, is there?
It's just very old.
The way that window is...
But that's a Victorian restoration. That looks Victorian. That's high Victorian.
Yeah.
That's not 60s. It's a very different look.
Very strange.
You can hear that our mood had dipped. We hadn't found the strange window with the twisted face. We hadn't expected to. But our hind brain was on alert.
The walls of this solid building were somehow permeable now. We had allowed ourselves to think that something could get in, and that we were no longer safe. Okay, that was the church. Second visit too.
Right.
That was depressing for some reason. I didn't enjoy that as much.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is weird, and this is, I think, what we're doing here.
The first time we went there, I was just showing you, hey, this is where I grew up. I went to school trips, and with architectural detail. Here's an interesting story.
Yeah,
and
it was a
now,
fun day out as well.
It felt like a different church.
It's pure confirmation bias, I think, but nonetheless,
or ghosts.
It's definitely ghosts.
I don't know.
It just felt really unsettling in a way that a friend of mine once told me they visited West Kennet Long Barrow in Wiltshire, and they said they couldn't stay there long because they said they had a feeling it didn't want them to be there. And if I was being melodramatic, I'd say that's what today felt like. It was like it did not want us to be there.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that the first time. It's just, it's purely emotional.
You're responding to whether you feel safe in an unfamiliar space.
First time we were there for half an hour, and this time we were there for, 10 minutes, which probably says it all, really.
To quote Shirley Jackson, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut, but something walked there now. To try and get back on solid ground, I made good on my promise and offered to take Will next door to the site of a local urban myth. After all, we knew scary stories feel safer when they're happening to someone else.
There's an empty field, and the field is not that big, and then next to it is the graveyard for the church that we are talking about this week. And this is a field that people camp in, and
generations of teenagers by the look of it.
They were like Cub Scouts, and then they were Scouts, and they'd camped places, and then they did, when they grew older, according to this post, went back to the places they'd camped as Scouts, but they went back as older teenagers when they were goths. So they would have come here to drink snakebite and black and smoke weed and do gothy stuff when they were teenagers. And they went, what do we do at the weekend? Let's go out to the old campsite and just stay overnight.
So psychogeographically, we're in the opposite of a make-out point. This is not a teenage, this isn't somewhere you come to get off with your mates. This is somewhere where you come to scare your other friends.
Yeah, you're coming back to somewhere that used to be safe. And the story is that they told on this message board, they came back, pitched their tents, and they hadn't brought anything to survive. They brought some drink and some crisps and some weed, and they'd also brought a Ouija board.
Of course.
And the idea being they were coming back to somewhere and they were going to make a safe place from their childhood, a bit more goth. So they took the Ouija board down to the churchyard just over the wall there.
Right.
And sat in the churchyard and tried to contact an entity from the other side in a way that teenagers do, because they're risk-taking organisms.
Exactly.
They will play around on the edge of quarries and things. So they did the usual thing, set it all up, and they were scaring each other and getting right on the edge of tension. Perfect place, perfect sort of emotional place to do a séance. And they said, is anything there? And they all had their hands on a shot glass, their fingers on a shot glass.
Of course,
Of course, that's what they have in their bags. A shot glass on the Ouija board, and immediately the shot glass whizzed over to one side, to the letter N. And they thought, it's going to say something. And then it just stayed there. On N. They said, is anyone there? Do you have a message? And it went N. And they were trying to put it back and thinking that one of them was messing about. Was it idiomotor? Were they just trying to... Were they playing a game? But it wouldn't move. They couldn't move the thing off N. It was stuck there, stuck fast. And eventually they all went, just let go. And they let go of the glass and it shattered. It's the perfect ending.
Oh my God.
It went N and then shattered. And then the best thing of all, they went back to their tents, and their tents had been trashed like a wind had whipped through.
Oh my God.
Obviously, it could be other kids. Someone could have seen them. It could have been some malicious scouts. But it was just that thing of N, can't move it off N, cannot move it off N. And then the glass shatters, and when they go back, the tents are all trampled.
That is perfect. My God.
And the great thing about that is it's a story, when it's posted up, all it was underneath it was other people saying, yeah, I remember that.
Jesus, you remember hearing about it.
Yeah.
The vintage seance story seemed to centre us, and back in the car, we had an idea. The terrifying stained glass Jesus might represent an irrational glitch in reality, but it could also be a mundane architectural detail. Maybe the annex had simply been removed when it dropped out of fashion, the aberrant 20th century structure bulldozed, the church seamlessly restored like so many others, with lottery funding maybe, to its picture postcard glory. So we went to ask someone who might know.
We have come somewhere we should have gone long ago. This is a local museum for the area, so it covers this bit of Essex. So we thought we will look for any photos of the church from this time to see if there are any of the window.
Yes, of anything there that might be, or possibly construed as scary Jesus.
So we went and talked to the lady here who runs the archive, and she said there is a huge collection of photos, none of which are any use because they're very old. But she did say if you wanted photos from the time we're looking at, there is an amazing resource because loads of photos of the area were taken because it's around the time of the Doomsday Project.
Very quickly, the Doomsday Project, which I was massively into as a kid, was a thing that ran in 1986, the year Nelson Mandela died. It was to commemorate 900 years of the Doomsday Survey that commissioned by William the Conqueror.
The 11th Century Project was a survey of the new possessions of the Norman invader. The indigenous populace thought this was a bit much and mockingly called it the Doomsday Book in reference to the Book of Revelation. William's national stocktake was, to them, an unholy parody of the judgment of God. 900 years later, the BBC, with characteristic ambition, decided to do it again.
They did it as a sort of local history thing where you and your mates and your scout troop and your primary school class and your local history archive would all get involved, take loads of pictures of your local area, and they'd all end up on a laser disc.
Which is where the lady was less than helpful, because she said, we do have a copy of the Doomsday Laserdisc in the museum for the local area and no way of playing it. So another dead end. But she did say, she was so helpful, she was a problem solver. She said, if people took those photographs that were included in the BBC's project, they'll have been very proud of them. They'll probably have a copy at home.
Yeah.
So if you go and look for people who were involved in the Doomsday Project, they might have photos of this church, of this area, from, I mean, it's not exactly when Paul was around, but from roughly that time. And there might be a really easy thing to search for, because you'd search for Doomsday Project.
Yes.
It's quite an easy search term.
Yeah.
So we've been to the cafe downstairs, used their Wi-Fi, the ultimate library.
Lo and behold.
The Doomsday Disc included, in its limited storage space, 3 low-resolution pictures of the area around the church in the mid-1980s. And there, in the first 2 pictures, it was.
Angular, modernist, with twisted anatomy and piercing eyes.
But even at thumbnail size, we could see it was not Jesus, but instead was Saint Sebastian, his sides pierced with arrows. Either way, it was clearly something real, dimly remembered by locals, but with one extra important caveat.
It's not the church.
No, it's not. It's a Christian centre, apparently, which was there, I think it was demolished in 87. And it was a 1960s building.
Nearby the church. So if you had a school trip there, you'd have seen both. So it's a really easy thing to misremember. You'd have thought on that day you'd seen it. It would be very easy for a teacher to say there is no such window in that church, but there were windows nearby at another building where you probably stopped to have your packed lunch.
Yeah. There's no pictures of scary Jesus.
No.
There are pictures of scouts in front of windows.
Oh, the windows look really similar. They're sort of Coventry Cathedral style. So we think that's the answer.
That's
it's a
enough for
misremembering.
me to think case closed,
It's
frankly.
not Mandela effect. It's just bad memory and 60s architecture and areas changing.
Yeah.
Obviously, the lovely thing about that is the Scouts have saved us again.
Yay!
God bless the Scouts.
Yeah. And maybe the Scouts on that picture are the Scouts who grew up to be the Goths. We did the say that would be amazing.
If everything was connected, that would be so nice. Yes, so
that
let's
would
say
be
it's them.
extraordinary.
And that seemed to be that. A neat ending and an actual explanation. This was what we were looking for. An unsettling story raising tantalising questions about the nature of memory and hinting at the possibility of split reality, but which succumbed to a rational investigation, packing itself away neatly and drawing in strands from different parts of our project. We had done our job. All it needed now was to be edited and narration added like this to form it into the shape of a story. But 2 days into the edit, I called Will and said I'd found something weird. There's a thing I was trying to fix the end of this episode. I was trying to fix it because it ends and then we need to leave something open. We need to leave a question.
Right. This one is the one with Scary Jesus.
Scary Jesus.
So it gets solved.
Because it's finished.
Right.
And it's finished. And it's like, it's back. It's under control.
Yeah.
So basically, we've got it under control. And this.
Personally, I didn't have a problem with that because I felt that it was,
I mean, we're playing fair.
Yeah.
And we're being honest.
Yeah.
We didn't leave that open. We're not going to play tricks and say that it's still scary.
Yes.
That we took Scary Jesus and made it not scary.
Yeah.
And I thought the perfect way to end it was to talk about
We could get together and we could talk about the ghost story that the Goths had told about the seance and
the camping trip,
right. And the glass breaking, and about what drives you to ask, is there anyone there?
Yes.
To look for something scary where there isn't anything scary.
Okay.
And I thought, well, the perfect thing to do then was, we already had one of those because you'd done it as a joke. And
in the church?
In the church, when we went there. When it was like we were just starting out, it was all jolly.
So you're going to throw back to that?
And it was a throwback, and I thought, what I'll do is I'll drop that in and say, look, we all do it. We look for scary things. When there aren't scary things, we try and make things scarier than they actually are. So I grabbed that clip of you teasing the church ghosts.
Yes.
And I dropped it in on the end of this episode when I was doing the mix.
Okay.
And I dropped it on the wrong channel. There's a channel below the studio and voice channel and location channel for driving, and the driving channel gets rid of the rumble and does noise reduction and boosts up the frequencies of human voices.
Right.
There's no phone.
So that's what you ran it through?
It's gone through, it's on the other channel, and when it's on the other channel...
What did you find?
Listen to this.
Okay.
Anyway, I mean, as someone who's interested in this stuff, you will find... Okay, so you're going to hear yourself first.
Right.
And then you're going to hear that silence.
Okay.
But through the vocal booster channel.
All right. There's me.
Yeah.
Shit.
What do you...
Those are voices.
What do you think?
They're voices. There's two voices on there talking about...
Doesn't it? It sounds...
It's two voices. I think if we're in an ancient church, we should do the thing. Say, is there anybody there? There we go.
Right. Okay, well, nothing fell off the wall.
No, that's good. So we're all fine.
Cool. Now,
that's so fucking weird.
It isn't two voices. It's a booster channel. It's a booster channel finding things in that frequency and shoving them up. Now, what it will do is it will find artifacts. It's like glitching. It's like digital artifacting. It will boost those up. And I was just wondering if it's a nice thing to put at the end, where we can say that's maybe what EVP is.
No,
your brain's
play it again. That's none of that.
Your brain is hearing the sound of voices because you're looking for it.
No, your brain is hearing the sound of voices because it's two voices.
We applied more filters, noise reduction, gates, equalizers, compressors, trying to sift the speech from the hiss. But we were aware that we might also be sculpting the scratches and glitches in that patch of silence to find something that was never there.
It's two. Play it again.
So go back. It's you first. Okay?
Right. Okay.
You're in full. Clarity.
Yeah. I can. Yeah. Anybody there? That's me with some scuff on it. It's two voices.
No silence on Earth is pure. We live surrounded by ambient noise that our brains filter out so we can focus on what we need to hear. Were we hearing voices where there was merely leaked, residual sound from another source?
Is it... Have we picked up a TV signal?
You can't, it's digital. That
doesn't reassure me. Is it radio? Is it something like that?
The only thing it can be is digital. We're talking about digital things. It is boosting sounds that aren't there. That's exactly what
previously used.
The software's meant to do. The software's meant to boost things that aren't there. So it's
Is it the shadow of something that was on a previous recording?
No, because you can't. It's not tape. It's digital. If it's anything, it's a glitch in the system. And I was only.
You don't think it's voices?
I don't believe any of this. I think that's voices.
It's two. You didn't want to tell it, but it's two voices.
I was hoping you'd say it was glitching.
No, it's clearly two voices talking.
So we boosted and gated, filtered and processed, pushing up the frequencies we needed to hear. And then we heard it. Two words in the mutter that we knew, that surely couldn't be anything else.
Station 14.
Station 14.
Next time on Broken Veil.
And this strange voice comes back on, and he says, "It is in hand," says this voice. "It is in hand. It is in hand. It is in hand," the voice says.
Broken Veil was created by Will Maclean and Joel Morris. Music by Philip Morris. Production and additional music cues by Joel Morris. Theme music by Josie M. Clark. Thanks to all our contributors. This podcast is a production of Cheese and Pickle in association with Loudburst.
If you want to say it loud. When you want to get your message across, you need Loudburst. Whether you're an experienced creator or you're new to digital communications, talk to us. We know what you're looking for, even if you don't. With everything from production tools and editing assistance to marketing know-how and integration, Loudburst is with you every step of the way. Loudburst, just what you want to hear.
I think if we're in an ancient church, we should do the thing, say, "Is there anybody there?" We go.
Right. Okay, well, nothing fell off the wall.
No, that's good. So we're all fine.
Cool.